Well. Here we are, straight up 2 o'clock, May 9th, 2024. It's official, ladies and jamsters. Frank Vogel has been fired from the Phoenix Suns. The team, the organization has been in a process over the past week trying to determine whether or not they wanted to stay the course, if you will. If they wanted to keep Frank Vogel at the helm of this organization. It's a tough one. Right? It's one of those things where you take a look at who this team is and who they were at the end of the season, what the expectations were. Let's roll it back a little bit, Jamsters. And first and foremost, what's going on? Here we go. Thursday afternoon podcast. Matthew and I will be going live tonight, as we already had every Thursday right now. Thursdays and Mondays is when we're doing our podcast, and we said, you know what? Whenever this news breaks, this news will break. And of course, it breaks right at 2 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon. But que sera, as Metallica once stated. So let it be written. So let it be done. Creeping death. Creeping death, man. Phoenix Suns are going to have their third head coach in 3 seasons when we tip off for the 24-25 season. Devin Booker, what's this going to be, his sixth coach in 10 years? Something like that. Stability, man. There's a lot of people who were not a fan of Frank Vogel and how this season ended. I mean, we talked about it, or we're talking about it, I guess. Overall expectations on this season was this team was going to mow over the competition. Conversations that we had amongst each other and right here on the Suns Jam Session podcast throughout the season was, or prior to the season, was could this team win 70? 65 easy. The over-under is 51 and a half. I wrote an article, said, dude, print your money. 51 and a half for this team? Print money. They went 49 and 33. And that 49 and 33 was a tumultuous 49 and 33. There was a couple of 7-game win streaks in there. There was a couple of times in which we finally we felt that this team was meeting the expectations that we had for it. But it was only for a few brief moments during the season. Outside of that, there was a lot of tumultuousness. There was a lot of it was a team that was playing like they thought they were better than they were. Don't worry, bro. Like when it counts, like we can win. Like we can totally win when we want to. Chaw. But then the playoffs came around. No wins. Zero. So one of those words that Matt Ishbia used at his press conference last Wednesday when he addressed the media for the first time since the team's unfortunate end was accountability. He believes in accountability. He holds himself accountable. He holds members of the team accountable. He holds members of the organization accountable. Today, that accountability came to fruition as they have parted ways with Frank Vogel. And it's one of the last times you're going to hear this annoying drop.
Frankie Vogel
Is no more. There is no Mas Frankie Vogel. A question that we will start to ask now, there's two that are upcoming. One, who's going to replace Frank Vogel? And two, is James Jones next on the chopping block? You never get, it's like the Lakers situation, right? Darvin Ham, gone. But Rob Pelinka remains, right? Now, the difference there is, and I guess in both cases, is a lot of the instructions on how to build those rosters came from above. But the Suns are now without a head coach. And Frank Vogel, to the delight of the fan base, I will say. I wrote a piece on Bright Side of the Sun, and I put a poll on there, and I asked the community, should Frank Vogel stay or should he go? 77% of the fan base said, gone. So there's your wish. And there's pros and cons to this, right? There's pros and cons. One, the pro is you know that you're most likely going to keep Kevin Durant. That's a pro. Now we'll still explore trade options for Kevin Durant this offseason because we wouldn't be proper podcasters if we did not, right? We're going to play that game because the season ended before May began, right? So we're going to trade off assets and see what value we can get and yada, 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 as Elaine would say on Seinfeld. We're going to play those games. But at the same time, continuity is going to go as well. And it's unfortunate because we're going to start to roll back and play this same game again, right? What game is that? You're asking yourself? That is the game of when the season begins and the Suns hit a road bump and a road bump. Is that the right term? A road bump, speed bump. When they hit speed bumps early on in the season, some of those questions that are going to arise are, or the statements that will be made are, well, they're just learning. It's a new coach, new system. It's going to take some time, right? And we're going to just play. It's like the same thing. The advantage of keeping Frank Vogel this season, in theory, is you would not have to deal with that. But even that being said, new coaches were going to have to come in. Kevin Young was going to be gone, so a new offensive scheme was going to have to be imparted. So I feel like with this firing, the Phoenix Suns and Matt Ishbia accomplished multiple things. Accountability. He said, we hold the Suns accountable. We will hold the members of this organization accountable, and I am accountable, right? That's what Ishbia said. So he's done that. He's lived up to his word of accountability by ex- uh, uh, taking the exit plan on Frank Vogel. They knew that there was the piece released by Doug Howler and Shams Charania on The Athletic minutes after the season ended, right? And part of that was Katie's camp, as Katie's camp does, leaked some information relative to how Kevin Durant was unhappy with how he was utilized this season. And we heard throughout the season and we always read too much into what Kevin Durant says or what any member of the Phoenix Suns says in press game or post game press conferences because they don't really say much, right? But he did express some frustrations throughout the season. So by firing Frank Vogel, now you don't have this. Well, if Frank's staying, will KD be happy? That whole conversation, it pretty much was almost being pit as a us versus him kind of situation, right? It's either you're on Team Frank or you're on Team KD because they're not going to be able to coexist moving forward. Knowing that you're going to have to reset aspects of the coaching staff, that's the third thing that's accomplished in this situation, right? They just swept everything right under the rug and said, you know what? If we're going to reset the whole coaching staff, we're going to start with the guy at top, a guy who just didn't have control of this team. We knew that this team was broken. We knew the aspects of this locker room were fractured, and we saw it throughout the season. Now, again, there's probably some of you out there who say, hey, it's the players who play. It's the players who were lackadaisical on the court. It wasn't Frank Vogel who was lackadaisical on the court. It was the players. So, what semblance of accountability should be divvied up their way, should be provided to them? And to this, I say, you're not going to man. They're making $47 million a year. You have to keep them happy. It's the modern NBA. It's the player empowerment era. If they're not a fan of the way that they were coached or the message that was being provided to them, then that's what it is. And that's what that article said on The Athletic, right? That Frank Vogel, after a loss against the Los Angeles Clippers, came in and all of a sudden he was hard ass Frank Vogel, right? I'm hard ass, guys. And they thought it was a fucking joke because Frank Vogel's kind of a fucking joke sometimes. Just is what it is. Uh, Yeah, I mean, it just is what it is. So I'm going to read some of the comments again. Anybody who's joining me, whether you're watching live now or later or listening, thank you for doing so. Another big day in Phoenix Suns history, another fucking lost coach. Let's see what some of the people who are watching along live on YouTube are saying. And if you're not watching on YouTube, head over there, throw something in the comments. We'll go ahead and we'll discuss some of this stuff. Suns Fever 83, one of our elite jamsters. If you want to become an elite jamster, hit the join button on our YouTube page. Says, let's get D'Antoni back and just push the offense. The defense shit didn't work. So this is an interesting statement, and this is something that I definitely was planning on talking about on tonight's podcast when Matthew and I are going over the state of the Suns. And obviously, Frank Vogel's firing will be part of that conversation, hearing what Matthew has to say. But the structure of the Phoenix Suns is so against the trend of whatever the NBA is doing, right? When the Phoenix Suns finally get an owner who's like, "Yo, we're gonna spend some fucking money, bro." The league's like, "Okay, you want to spend money? Penalize, penalize, penalized." When we have a finesse team, which let's be real, the Suns are always a finesse team. When's the last time they were not a finesse team? James Edwards and Truck Robinson days back in the early 80s, they've always been a finesse team. But what happened in the middle of this season? Teams that play physical and play defense are being rewarded. We're seeing that now in the postseason. So Suns Fever saying, let's get D'Antoni back for the offensive aspects. The defense didn't work. I say go the other way. Lean into defense and put assets around this team that can lead to defense. Now, obviously, that's not going to happen because we're very handicapped. But the league's changing again. The Suns are going to be behind the curve, right? The only time we were ahead of the curve was the 7 seconds or less Suns. And instead of leaning into that the way they should have, they took a step back and they're like, all right, Quentin Richardson's gone. Joe Johnson's gone. Let's bring in Kurt Thomas. That worked out great. Let's see. And okay, so David Jolovitz or Yolovitz, pardon my pronunciation. My last name is Voida, so I know what it's like to have my name fucked up. And I'm sure, David, you know as well. Says we need youth and athleticism, doggedness in defense. I agree 100% with that. And unfortunately, it's going to take quite some time for us to catch up with what the league is doing. And unfortunately, by the time we do that, the league will change again, and we'll be like, okay, we got this big, brawny defensive league, not Bronny James, brawny defensive league, and that's when Adam Silver will be like, okay, it's back to touch fouls. Oh, David also said, what's the value of Vogel ones now? Priceless. It's a good point. $1.99 in the super chat from David. Appreciate that. Says Thursday lunch break coffee fund. Amen to that. P Dog 006. D'Antoni back with Nash as an assistant coach, and a lot of heart emojis. It'd be interesting. Obviously, there's a relationship between Kevin Durant and Steve Nash. I'm not 100% on the specifics of that, but that would be quite interesting. I must say. Um, yeah, it's not. I don't think any of us are listening or watching this and saying, you know what, I'm shocked by this decision by the Suns. I really can't believe they did it. I think a lot of people were calling for this. I think this is, again, an opportunity for Matt Ishbia to address the fan base and say, hey, I hear you, and I know that you're not happy, and therefore we've made these decisions. So, again, I think that this move, as much as it hurts the stability overall on this team, is the right move. And kind of glad the Suns did it, to be honest. Needed to be done. Needed to be done, Jamsters. So I know it's a quick one. It's 15 minutes. I got to go back to work. But again, oh, and I love this, what Seth says. We need some give a shit first. And I don't know if Frank gave a shit or knew how to inspire people to give a shit. Didn't seem like a fiery coach. You go back, and I'll ask you guys this question. Monty or Frank? Who is a better coach? Now, obviously, if you're going over history, Monty, because he got the Suns to a championship opportunity, the 2021 NBA Finals, but he was much more of an inspirer. Now, the issue we had with him is we felt like he had reached his peak as a coach with this team, and that his adjustments weren't very calculated or concise or correct come the postseason. But at the same time, I much rather would have had Monty guiding this team than Frank Vogel. So we'll see. We'll have plenty more on this tonight. If you're listening to this, come join us tonight, 8 p.m. Arizona time. Matthew, Lissy, and I will be talking on the Suns Jam Session podcast as regularly planned. Make sure you subscribe, rate, review. You can follow me at Darth Void and read all my writing at Bright Side of the Sun. Again, Frank Vogel is fired. What next? Chaos, my friends. Nothing but pure and utter chaos. Go home and love your family.